Hi, everyone. It's Dina at the Realize Foundation, and I have another special guest here for you. And his name is Steve, and I can't wait for you to hear his story. So, welcome, Steve.
Dina, it's great to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear more. I mean, I've learned a little bit about you, but I'm excited to hear more about your story because that's what we do here. We tell stories so people know they're not alone in whatever they're struggling with. And so I'm excited and everybody should know that you're a pastor, correct?
I am. I've been a pastor for about 15 years.
That's awesome. And where do you live?
I'm in Memphis, Tennessee,
Memphis,
where
Tennessee.
the National Guard has just been deployed. So, not to get political.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. Well, I'm going to let you tell us more about yourself.
Oh, I appreciate it, Dina. I appreciate the opportunity to share. Um, you know, a lot of people I think will relate to what I'm about to share. If I go back, way back in time, I come from a broken home. I was born in Richmond, Virginia, and my parents divorced when I was really young, 2 years old. And of course, I don't remember that specifically, but what I do remember was, after the dust settled from the divorce, that my mom had primary custody. And I have fond memories of those early years, with her being a single mom after the divorce, from like age 2 to age 7. I have some pretty good recollection. What I also remember that wasn't so great was those times sitting on the front porch, the front steps to our apartment. And this is long before cell phones, just showing my age a little bit. And my father, when he would have those weekend visitations, sometimes he would show up and sometimes he would not. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you're a little boy that really wanted his father in his life, like I did, those evenings when you're sitting on those front steps and it goes dark and you're hoping he's still going to come and the phone inside hasn't rang and mom's fixing you a plate of dinner just in case he doesn't show up because she knows there's a likelihood that he won't. I had no idea the effects that had on me going into adolescence and really quite honestly the teen years and early adult years, the anger, the unprocessed emotions that I carried with me with that. Now you might be saying, well, yeah, why would you carry all of that just from some inconsistent visitation? Well, there's actually more. um, my mom remarried when I was 7, and we moved out of state from where my biological father was. And I don't know all the details, but the main thing that I want to get across was my biological dad wasn't paying child support. And I remember my mom and her new husband sent him a letter basically saying, you need to step up to the plate and take care of Steve, or my mom's new husband's like, I'm willing to adopt him if you want to surrender your rights. And I didn't know all of this until a little later. But basically, my biological dad, he chose that route to surrender his rights, and then my mom's new husband adopted me, and they had their nice little family in theory, as they went on to have 2 other kids, and we had this family of 5, right? Well, that had a huge impact on me because the way I took that was abandonment. And from age 7 to age 22, I wanted nothing to do with my biological father. And he would call occasionally, and my mom would always give me the opportunity to talk to him if I wanted to, but I didn't want anything to do with him because he basically, and from my perspective, gave up on me. And yeah, I've matured in some of my thought process since then. But anyway, I that manifested itself into anger, and I, got in fights and was bullied and did some bullying, and just was not a happy camper for many years. And that carried on into college where I partied too much and, just wasn't an enjoyable person to be around. And all of that unprocessed emotion was oozing out of me in anger or isolation at times. And I dealt with that, or didn't deal with it, it would be more accurately described, for a number of years. And I can say that when I picked up the phone at age 22 to call him, I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's true. I was a little under the influence when I called him, and this is now. I want answers. I want to know why. I want to know why the abandonment. I want to know why the divorce. All that stuff. And I verbally let him have it pretty good, and we had a few of those conversations, and I got to give him credit. Here's this 22-year-old temperamental, stiff-necked kid, giving him the third degree for 5 or 6 phone calls an hour at a pop. And to his credit, he kind of took it on the chin and he answered those questions the best he could. But yeah, that really had an effect on me. There's some other things that also had an effect on me. For one example, I learned right around the same time frame, maybe a year or two later, 23, 24 years old, I learned that I had an older sister on my dad's side, and my mom knew about it. And when I confronted her about it, the response was, I didn't think you needed to know that. And I was like, that's not for anybody else to decide. That's my flesh and blood. And obviously, these are a long time ago, and all is forgiven and all that. But I think the weight of those two things just really did some damage to my heart and my psyche, and my feelings of I would describe it as self worth was not where it needed to be. Lack of self love, probably at times some low level depression and anxiety. Definitely, feelings of unworthiness, and that just dominated for a long time. Dina, I don't know if you want to ask any questions there or want me to keep going.
No, I'm curious about your relationship with your stepdad.
Well,
if you want to talk about it.
Well, it's not good currently. That is a whole nother story. I will say, to his credit, he was a very good provider, and he did provide a stable home, which obviously I needed at that time. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think of the time frame. So I was 7 when I came into his household, and then it was a couple of years later they started having their family, so to speak. But they have their own kids. So my brother and sister are like 8 and 9 years younger than me. And it was a fairly stable home. I mean, nobody was perfect. We had issues, but nice suburban home, and decent schools and a decent upbringing. And now in the middle of all that, I'm dealing with all this anger, which is not great for the household. But there was a lot of different dynamics at play there. But I think, just to answer your question, in general, he was a good provider.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I wonder, I can imagine what you're saying about when you called your dad the first time at 22, I think you said. And he's however old he is with whatever he has going on, and you called him out of the blue. I could see how that could have been hard for him.
Sure.
But it was also, a long time that you went without answers.
Yeah, when you're young and immature and angry, you don't tend to see things from other people's perspective. So that's a great point that you bring up. View it from his perspective of, get this call out of the blue, and it's not a pleasant call. It puts you back on your heels. That's why I said you got to give him credit. He did hang in there and take it on the chin, so to speak. But you know, the good news, and I'll just kind of carry on a little bit from that
Mhm.
point, was um, we arranged for him to come visit me. It was about a 10-hour drive from Virginia, where he was. We were living in the, by this time, I'm out on my own. I'm working. I've got an apartment with a couple of roommates. And he was going to come visit me, and he did. And the plan was, you know, he got there that first afternoon, was I was going to, you know, just spend a couple of hours with him in the hotel room, because we both needed to still feel each other out. And you know, it was some more questions, but it was civil. It was civil conversation. It was productive. Matter of fact, it was so productive that the next day, which was going to be the only full day he was in town, he had a small business in Virginia that he couldn't be gone for too long for. But I was going to show him where I lived, going to show him around town a little bit. And that morning, this again, still before cell phones, that morning I couldn't reach him on his hotel phone to see if he was ready. And that's when I learned from the front desk that he had left word that he just couldn't handle probably my intensity, to be honest with you. And he drove back to Virginia without telling me. So, you know, in
Mhm.
essence, there was a second abandonment there, I've been told. And praise God, we actually were able to get through that. This is long, long, long before I was a Christian, but I was able to forgive that. And a buddy of mine needed a favor. He needed me to drive him up to his mom's in Maine, of all places, during a blizzard. And on the way back down from Maine, we took 95 down, and this was all coordinated. And I saw my dad for the first time. For the first time since I was 7, and I was maybe 24 at the time, so 17 years. And we actually had a good visit. It probably helped that my friend was with me, and my stepmom was there, because it's their house. Not that anything would have happened. I think that just made everything comfortable for everybody. And
Yeah.
we had a good visit. And so what I would say, to kind of close the loop on him, was we went on to have 4 decent years of dialogue by phone. It never got as deep as I would have hoped it would have, but we had a love of sports, we had a love of current events. And you know, every 3-4 weeks we'd get on the phone for 45 minutes to an hour, and we'd talk about current events and sports. And I kind of view this, and I tell other people that have similar situations, you know, with their parents that they're estranged from. You know, I hoped, like everybody does when you're a child, you hope that your relationship with your parent will be like way up here. And mine was non-existent right here. Well, you know what? If we got here the last 4 years, it's a gift. I'll take it. And so he passed away not too much longer after that visit I just described to you. He passed away about 4 years later, and I was able to say goodbye to him on his deathbed. And he begged me. He was very, very sick. He begged me for forgiveness. And again, still not a Christian, but by the grace of God, I was able to forgive him and felt peace about it. And hopefully he did too.
Well, that's a good ending to that story for sure.
Yeah.
That you were able to. I mean, I know so many people who have lost a parent or somebody they really cared about, and they didn't have that closure. That's really hard.
Yeah. I can't fathom not having that closure, because it's brought me a lot of peace. So yeah, when you say that my heart breaks for those that don't get that closure.
But also think that it is an experience that probably helps you help many other people in your profession.
Yeah, I think it does, for sure. I think it teaches you compassion, um, empathy. I think it tends to lend towards you being a better listener and letting them, because I needed that, right? I needed to get all that stuff out.
Mhm.
And people want to be heard. They want to know that you will listen to them until it's all out. And then if they need to do it again, you'll listen again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it does lend itself to that.
I think that the hard things we go through prepare us for, in many ways, our purpose. And I think that's why I'm here having this conversation with you right now, because if it wasn't for my suicide attempt and being silent for so long and then losing a friend,
Mm.
I wouldn't be doing this. Like, that's what started this whole thing. So I think sometimes we have hard things that happen in our life and it's preparing us for something that we're meant to do.
I believe that with all my heart, Dina. And yeah, to see you after that dark season of your life,
Mm-hmm.
to come back and want to serve the very population that you relate to, that's just proof of that, right? That
Yeah, I think
you
so.
want to give back.
Mhm. So, do you want to tell me your story about becoming a Christian?
Oh my goodness. Well, I met my wife, that visit to the hospital. Um, that was the year my wife and I, Rebecca, were married. No, was it that year? No, was it no? Rebecca and I got in the year married the year before, and so the phone rang, and it wasn't my dad; it was his wife. And she said, as your dad's been very, very sick, and it's fast tracked, and this may be the time you need to come if you're able to. And we did. We didn't have children yet. Um, we took our one dog at the time, and we made the drive. And of course, what I described to you.
Mhm.
I'm telling you that mostly to give you time frame of my wife and I. We were married in 1996, and we had experienced 5 miscarriages in 6 years. So fast tracking now to 2001, and we went through some difficult times, not necessarily marriage wise. Well, it impacted the marriage, but just some financial difficulties. Um, just really had a strain on the marriage. And then because of the financial difficulties, I took on a second job. And the second job was like I would work the first job from like 7:30 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. The second job was right down the street and started at like 4:30 in the afternoon and went till 7 in the morning. Crazy. I got to sleep there, but I'm basically gone from Monday morning until Friday afternoon. Not exactly conducive for a great marriage, right? And so where I'm going with this is I eventually had an emotional affair with a coworker on my first job. And that's never easy to confess, but I've learned to, because it's gonna reveal, as I continue to tell the story, it's gonna reveal the power of God. And I had a voicemail from my wife at one point saying, I don't know where you're at, but I know who you're with. And when you get home, we need to have a serious conversation about our marriage, or else I'm calling a divorce attorney in the next 48 hours. Yeah, that got my attention.
Mhm.
And we did have that talk when I got home. And it's a long story, but in essence, what was happening there was God was driving both of us to our knees to call on Him. And we both got involved in Bible studies through people at a church that we knew. And it March 14th, 2004, I was baptized and turned around and baptized her on the same stage. And that began a whole new journey, a whole new world opened up on our rebirth day.
That's awesome. I think it's, and I mean, I grew up in church, and then when I got in college, I went way far away from that for a while. And after my suicide attempt, I kind of got back into my faith. And I would say that, I always, I dated a lot of people that were not the right person for me, or were not kind, were not whatever. And when I met my husband, it was just completely different. I was 32 when we met, and he was a Christian. And we were in a couples Bible study for 9 months before we got married. And there were 14 couples. The other 13 were all married. We were the only ones that were engaged but not married.
Mhm.
And I always say that we've been married for almost 22 years now. And I always say that I don't think we would have the marriage we have if we wouldn't have done that.
Mm, that's great. That's a big group too, by the way.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, it was laid a foundation for you.
it was really a great experience. And even though we haven't seen those people in probably 20 years, like we're still friends on Facebook and check in with each other sometimes and stuff like that. So if there's anybody listening that's engaged to be married, it's a good idea.
Right.
Even if you're not a Christian, it's a good idea to learn some things about that, and be able to talk about it as a couple, to talk about your beliefs and all of that, whether you're a Christian or not. I think it's really important to understand that about each other.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So then we have to hear the story about how you became a pastor.
Well, you might, if you want a little encouragement, you may want to ask me eventually, because I haven't really given this away, but I'll answer your question about how we started our family too. Because remember,
Oh,
I mentioned the miscarriages, so that becomes a roller coaster story too. But
yes.
actually, let me go there because there's some alignment with the question about pastoring and the kids. Um, and I'll keep the version of the family a little shorter than I usually do. So remember, I said we had 5 miscarriages in 6 years, and then after we became Christians, we started praying. Okay, God, do you want us to start our family through adoption? And typical of God, he presented a situation to us. It wasn't super serious. It was just kind of one of those situations. Hey, do you know this family here? Well, and it forced us to, okay, are we really serious about this? And we're like, yeah, we are. Um, and that began a 5-year adoption journey. And we were not exactly spring chickens when we started. By this time, I think we're like 37, 30. Well, I'm a couple years older than Rebecca. I'm like 37, 38, I think, at this time. And the one story that I will tell you is, you do your home study and you pick your adoption agency, not in that order, by the way, and you go through all your foster training that's required, and you get your pictures done, and all that stuff, and then you go through training with the adoption agency, which that could take months depending on when the next grouping starts. And we were picked by a birth mother who was 7 months pregnant, lived about an hour away. Had dinner with her and her mother and her 11-year-old daughter, and we really hit it off with them. She picked us to be the adoptive parents of her little girl. She let us name it almost right away, and I said name it. I meant name her. Sorry, but long story short, in the hospital, and I was the first one to hold the baby. That's a whole nother story. Like I've never been in a delivery room before. Uh, and that was on a Friday after 10 hours of labor. And on Sunday, an hour before we were to go home with our baby girl, the birth mother changed her mind. And I can tell you, this is going to sound nuts to some people. One of the best days of our lives. because we were totally prayed up. We were totally surrendered to what could happen. And when it happened,
Mhm.
I remember I wasn't in the room with her. My wife and her family was when she made the announcement. They had the caseworkers had to come get me. I was like, y'all need to leave me alone so I can pray for a second. And then I went straight to her room,
Mhm.
and she started bawling when I walked in the room. I'm so sorry, Steve. I'm like, you don't owe us an apology. I kissed her on the forehead and I said, this is God's child first, your child next. Anything we can do to help. And that child ended up back in our home a month later with a fractured skull.
Oh my gosh.
And it was an accident. She was dropped on her temple on the edge of a coffee table leg, and was fighting for her life at Vanderbilt Hospital.
Mhm.
Obviously, she lived, and it's a series of events where the baby ended up back in our home for 6 months, and she's fine. She's perfectly fine. I think she's 17 years old now, if I'm not mistaken. And we went on from there. If I'm making it sound like just moving on. Obviously, it was intense, but we moved on from there to have 5 more adoptions fail. And so we
Wow.
had 5 miscarriages and 6 failed adoptions. And then our adoption agency, going into year 5, parted ways with us. We never got a reason why. We look back now and think, well, it's probably because we're over 40 years old, and they're not going to, obviously they're not going to tell you that. That's
Mhm.
why. But so we had no adoption agency, no leads, these 6 failed adoptions, and it was like we hadn't even started.
Oh my gosh.
And then God gave us 3 kids at one time. 3 kids at one time. It's complex. But it's two. It's a girl and a boy, full sibling group. They were, at the time they came into our home, she was 3.5, he was 2, and then from a different situation, a 1-month-old baby. And they were 4, 3, and 6 months old when the adoption was final. And they're now 18, 17, and 14. Hasn't been easy, but huge blessings, needless to say, after praying all those years for just one child.
Mhm.
So this is where it flows into your question about ministry. So what's going on simultaneous to
Mhm.
these prayers for a child is, as we had become, how would you say, as we had served more in the church, you know, ushering, book table, led a family group for a few years. I started a men's group within the church. We started praying about full-time ministry. And, the elders of our church knew it, the staff knew it. We were involved in a lot of things, but hadn't quite made that leap, if you will, to full-time ministry.
Mhm.
And we walk into church that first Sunday after we had the kids came into our home. And of course, these are all our church community been praying with us for these 5 years, right?
Mhm.
We walk into church with these 3 kids, and people are like, and I mean, obviously a lot of faith building going on there. After service, one of the elders pulled me to the side and he says, I know you've been, congratulations, da 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 da. Know you've been praying about the ministry. Got an opportunity we want to talk to you about. And he said, we can't pay you, so keep your job here in Tennessee, but we have a sister church in Huntsville, Alabama. And we kind of lived in the middle. We were kind of an hour south of Nashville, um, and then we did everything in the Nashville vicinity, and then Huntsville was about an hour and 15, 20 minutes away further south.
Mhm.
But what they said was, you could preach every Sunday, you can be their primary contact person, and we can pay you for your mileage, and we can pay for your family's lunch every Sunday, and then you go to lunch with them, after service every Sunday. So it was kind of getting our feet wet. And we eventually, so from a spiritual perspective, they're a church with 20 people and 12 kids. Okay. But from a legal entity, they hadn't had their nonprofit status yet. So they weren't a church legally. And we were trying to get it planted legally in the 2 years that we volunteered there. They are an official church now. That happened after, much later, but we were hoping it would be during our time there. But God had other plans. He took us to Springfield, Illinois, where we knew no one, and we're not comfortable with the area, weren't comfortable with the weather, none of that. And that's how we got our, well, I won't say feet wet. Our feet were already wet. Now we're diving straight head in to full-time
Yeah.
ministry. So there you go.
Wow. Well, I've had 3 miscarriages, and I wrote about it in, I think, Scars to Stars, Volume 2. And so I have stepkids that are 30 and 33 now, which is crazy to me.
Wow.
They were pretty young when I met them, but I wonder, you said Mandeville Hospital.
Vanderbilt.
Oh, Vanderbilt. Okay.
In Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah.
Got it. Because Mandeville is in Louisiana, and I used to live there. I went to high school in Covington right by there. So I was like, wait, did he say Mandeville?
That would have been wild, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of this. I think it's really, I think everybody goes through so much stuff in their life. And sometimes we only remember a third of it. Like for me, it's like there's a lot of things that I don't remember. I had 5 concussions before first grade.
Oof.
Because I was just a tomboy, and I wasn't abused or anything like that. I just got hurt a lot. I broke my elbow when I was 5 because I fell off a horse and the horse stepped on me. Because my uncle had a barn and horses, and so it's kind of a few weird things happened, but not anything that was on purpose or anything like that. But it's just, I think in 2020, when I finally had time to process a lot of things from my suicide attempt, I really decided or understood that I had had depression throughout my life, even as a kid, but I never understood it. And I think it's important that, we pay attention to that stuff more now. Sometimes I think we go overboard, but I think I think we're affected by a lot more toxins in our world and things that affect us in different ways than they used to. I think there's a lot of things about our world that's just different now than it was 50 years ago. And people have different problems than we did when we were kids, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't mind saying that, when people describe me, strong, resilient, tenacious, all that stuff, which is very encouraging. But I have no doubt that through some of this that I described to you, that I was dealing with functional depression, without a doubt. And I don't know, maybe a lot of them wouldn't admit it, but there's a fair number of ministers, if they're being totally honest, they go through some, you deal with some tough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd only be human not to have some depression. Fortunately for me, I was never like bedridden with it. I know people like that, and it breaks my heart, but I was able to function.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no doubt I've dealt with it.
Yeah. I think it's like, when you think of pastors and first responders and doctors and the things they see and have to deal with, and if it doesn't affect you, you're not human. I mean,
right.
It's a lot to handle. And I think that when people are in those positions, I think of those people as strong because, dealing with some of that and having compassion and being able to help people is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having this conversation with me.
Well, thank you for having me. You're strong, Dina. You're extremely strong.
Well, thank you. I've learned that over the years. I didn't used to think so.
Well, but you do now, right? That's what matters.
I do. I think I'm strong in a lot of ways. I think, um, like when I had my event company and my husband was traveling with hotels, we were apart for a lot of time during about 10 years. Um, and now we don't have that situation anymore, thank goodness. But I think it was both of us had to be pretty strong to keep our marriage the way it was, and we have, we're just, I don't know. I think all those years I wanted to get married and I wanted to find the right person and it never worked out. Well, God was just making me wait for the right person, and he was right.
That weight, whatever it is always so challenging. But when it's from God, it is always worth it, right?
It is. It really is. It really is. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.